Hi everyone, my name is Niamh Shanahan. I'm on the marketing team here at Populo. We're delighted to have you on our webinar today, How to Build a Successful Career in Internal Communications, Insights from an IC Recruiter. We know that you, the internal communicators, are at the heart of your organization, connecting all of the dots, bringing cohesion to whatever chaos the world introduces, and ultimately moving your companies forward. But because of the pressure cauldron to ensure effective employee comms, we found that communicators are spending less time thinking strategically about your own careers. And that's why we want to set time aside today to talk about how to advance your career while at the same time ensuring the steps you take are beneficial for your organization. So whether you're just starting out or looking towards that next step, we promise this session will offer valuable insights and practical advice. So get ready to take notes and please ask plenty of questions. You can use the Q&A function on your console. And as always, we'll share the recording with everyone who's registered. So let's get started. I'd like to welcome our speakers today, Andrew Harvey and Joss Matheson. And I'm going to hand over to them both to introduce themselves and dive into our session. Hey, Joss, welcome.
Thank you very much, Niamh, and hello everyone. It's great to be with you today. By way of introduction, I am Joss Matheson. I'm the founder and Chief Encouragement Officer at Change Oasis. We're a specialist leadership, culture and change consulting firm. I'm an executive and team coach who regularly works with communications and HR leaders and advises organizations on change. And before founding Change Oasis, I worked as a communications leader myself for over 25 years in large organizations, including many years leading internal communications teams. So this is a topic today that's very close to my heart, and I'm really looking forward to this. And I'm delighted to be here with Andrew Harvey. Andrew, would you care to introduce yourself as well?
Thanks, Josh. Thanks, both. Yeah, great to be part of the conversation this afternoon. So my name is Andrew Harvey. I am the Chief Executive of VMA Group, and VMA Group is an international executive search and recruitment organization. We focus significantly on the world of comms and internal comms specifically. I actually started my career in internal communications probably about 25 years ago. I only worked in internal comms for a short period of time, about 5 years. But for the last 20 years, they've been working in the recruitment space and focusing very much on the recruitment of internal comms professionals and advising people on career development, learning development, et cetera, et cetera. I'm also actually a non-executive director of the Institute of Internal Comms here in the UK as well. So the world of internal comms, career development, learning, et cetera, has been right at the heart of what I've been doing for the last 20, 25 years. So hopefully some useful stuff to be able to share with everyone this afternoon.
Yeah, I don't doubt it. And I've had the pleasure of knowing you, Andrew, for many, many years as well. We won't say how many. That might give our age away somewhat. But it's, certainly, I've worked with you in many guises and looking forward to this conversation. I know you've got a lot to share. It's going to be really valuable. We've got quite a lot of people on the call and we would love to have you guide us a little bit. So Andrew and I have a number of things that we're going to talk about, but we also would love your questions. So please do add your questions in the Q&A. If you're not familiar with Zoom, you can find it in the bar at the bottom. If you hover your mouse over it, there's a Q&A button and you can add your questions there. Also, by all means, share your thoughts in the chat as we go through. If there's things that resonate with you, if you've got perspective to share, don't be shy. We'd love to hear from you as well. And we'd like to kick off actually by getting some input from you. We'd love to get your input to a couple of polls that we'd like to run. So I'm going to ask my good colleagues at Populo if they can put the first poll up, which you should now see hopefully on your screen. So you can see the options. To what extent have you developed a communications plan for yourself or your comms team? So please do take a moment to think about that. It's okay, no shame if you haven't developed a comms plan. That's okay. We're interested to get an idea through to you've documented a comms plan and you have measurable objectives. So take a moment to just think, be honest, which one is the best descriptor of where you're at right now, and maybe we can reveal the results of that. Okay, so we've got a good spread, Andrew. So what is your take on those results that you see?
It is probably, it's good to see that people have got a plan with measurable objectives, and that is the highest there. I think it is reflective of what I would expect to see, Joss. I think there's some good stuff going on there. Obviously, everyone's doing well, most people are doing a bit of something, perhaps some that haven't done it, but yeah, probably reflective of what I've seen over the last 20 years. So I think it feeds into the conversation that we're going to have, and obviously part of the reason why we ask these questions, but yeah, reflective of what I would have expected.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think that's encouraging to see that the majority have a comms plan. Most, are actually, a comms plan with measurable objectives. I think it's really important that we're able to demonstrate the value of our function. I think that's also a reflection of we have much better tools and technologies available to us now that help us to measure things like Populo as an example, as a platform that can really help with that. Okay, great. That's given us an idea of kind of where people are at. Can we run our second poll? So what we'd like to know in this second poll is whether you've invested in a personal career and development learning plan. So to what extent have you put something in place? So either you haven't, you've thought about it, but maybe haven't got around to putting it down in writing. You do have something as a career development plan, but maybe it doesn't include measurable objectives. Or you do have a clearly documented career plan and it has measurable objectives. So which one of those is most accurate for you? Let's reveal your votes and see where we're at on this one. Okay, so slightly different spread on this one, Andrew. What does that tell you? Is that close to what you were expecting?
Again, I think that is it is reflective of what I would expect, and again, I think it sets up the conversation well in terms of hints and tips as we go through the day. So it is generally the case a lot more people have a plan for their day job and their comms and their organisation than they perhaps do for themselves. And maybe there's some gaps we can close following the conversation this afternoon. But yes, it is what I would have expected, and there's a difference there, isn't there? There's a difference between the first poll and this second poll for sure.
Yeah, I think you've summarized it really well. Hopefully what we can do today is encourage people that actually if you take the trouble to invest in writing down your career plan and even better have measurable objectives, it's much more likely you're going to invest in yourself, in your development, in your career, and it's going to deliver what you're hoping it will. So we'll unpack that. But yeah, it's not a huge surprise. We thought the juxtaposition would be interesting. Okay, so let's take the poll down. I think to kick us off, Andrew, it'd be great to have some context. And VMA Group, I know, does quite a lot of research on a regular basis, looking at the industry. And I think you've got some interesting stats that you're going to share with us.
I have, for sure. And I think, this afternoon, I'm going to talk about lots of different things. It will be a combination of views based on personal experience over the last 25 years, but also a lot of the research that VMA Group has done over perhaps the 40-odd years of its existence. So I'm throwing in 3 stats here, which I think are absolutely relevant to the discussion and also actually relevant to what we've just seen in terms of the polls there. So our research tells us in 2025, 77% of IC professionals are going to be looking for a new job, that dream opportunity, their dream career move. And what that says to me is it's going to be really competitive for those people. If you're looking for a job this year, you're going to have to be at the top of your game, super prepared, super ready to go, be the best that you can be, because there's going to be a lot of people alongside you who are going to be fighting for those same brilliant opportunities. That's a fact. We'll talk more about that. I think the second point, 23%, again, VMA Group, certainly over the last 10 or 15 years that we've been running a particular piece of research around the internal comms industry, this has hovered between 20 and 25% this. So, the majority of people are not given a formal development or learning plan by their organization or a formal budget, etc., etc. What this tells me, and has told me for many years, that your own personal learning plan, your own personal development plan, your own personal career plan, you have to take accountability for that, because unfortunately, rightly or wrongly, your organization, your employer is not going to do that. So you absolutely have to own your own learning and development and your own future career, and we'll definitely talk more about that. And then the final stat, again, it's slightly provocative and perhaps in terms of asking this question, but, we ask people, how much time do you actually spend investing in your own learning development? And there's quite a lot of people that spend less than an hour per week. And I get lives are busy. We've got family and partners, we've got dogs to walk, and we've got the gym to go to and stay healthy and all of that sort of stuff. But I say rather provocatively, look, how much time do you spend watching Netflix? I think there's a lot of people, perhaps some of my friends included, who spend hours on hours watching Netflix every week, but spend very little time in terms of their own personal development. So it's a bit provocative to say that to people. It gets them to think in terms of where are they really spending their time, and could they do a little bit more if they want to land that dream job. So hopefully some interesting stats to share there.
Yeah, really useful. Thank you for sharing that with us. And I believe that the research that's based on, so that is going to be available for, I believe, Platinum Plus members. It'll be confirmed in the chat. I'm sure Christine or Neve will clarify who can access that, but they can get to that through their Popular membership. So thank you for making that available, Andrew. I think that'd be really useful for people. So let's get into the conversation, and I'll keep an eye out for questions as they come in as we go through. Please do add those to the Q&A as we go, but we'll have time at the end as well. I'm curious, to kick us off. So building on the stats that you've showed there, this is a function, to my mind. I mean, I've certainly, in doing the job myself, I've always tried to kind of, be more strategic, to add more value, to really kind of be close to what leaders are looking for. So I have a view, but I know you do as well. How do leaders in today's organization, how do they view internal communications, and what do they want from internal communications functions in 2025?
And I think this is a really important question because it has changed. I think, as I say, and I'm talking about 25 years, I'll keep going back to that. That's the time that I've been in this sector. And it has changed over the last 25 years. What CEOs and business leaders expect today, their IT professionals, is different to what they wanted in the past. So I'll give you 3 examples. So 20 years ago, the CEO would speak to the internal comms manager, head of internal comms, and they would expect them to be an expert in internal comms. Okay, that was the job title. That has now broadened. So the CEO will speak to the internal comms manager or the head of internal comms, but actually they will expect, rightly or wrongly, for that individual to be much more of an expert in broader communications. So if you're going to talk to your CEO about internal comms, they'll actually probably start weaving in some questions about external comms, media relations, maybe some PR, maybe some public affairs, maybe some CSR type stuff. And so actually there is a much bigger demand, heavier demand on IT professionals now to understand that broader communications landscape. And that's something that has changed. But if you want to be talking the same language as your CEO, that's something you're going to need to do. I think the second thing that's come through really strongly in our research is that CEOs take for granted, it is a given if they're chatting to you as a comms professional, that you understand comms. It's like going into a baker's and expecting them to bake bread. That's a given. What CEOs want, and this came through really strongly, is that they want their comms professionals to be real business leaders too. They want them to understand the business. They want them to understand the sector that they work in. They want them to understand the competitive landscape. They want them to understand why their competitors might be selling more than them, or they're selling more than their competitors. They want them to be business leaders and come to meetings and come to conversations talking about business, and then bringing in facts, value add in terms of how communications can support that. That wouldn't have been the case 25 years ago. There needs to be a much greater focus on business language and commerciality than ever there was. And I think the other sort of final point I would make, and again, I think this comes through really strongly, is that, ultimately organizations' aims, objectives are set by the chair, the board, and the CEO. And I think in this day and age, CEOs, the most demanding CEOs certainly, when they're speaking to comms professionals, they expect that every comms activity within an organization is linked back to supporting the goals, the objectives of the chair, the board, and the CEO. And if it's not, they might either question why that is being done, or they might lose interest in that activity and lose interest in that conversation. So yeah, linking comms activity right back to those key organizational objectives is really important. And again, that is something I don't think we would have seen so strongly 20 years ago, not necessarily for the internal communications community.
Yeah, you've struck a chord. I can see some of the comments in the chat already. Agreeing with you. Yeah, we're supposed to understand everything. Even search for jobs, job description has all the things you mentioned. Expects us to know it all. Don't forget employee engagement, not just internal communications. Yeah, you can talk about employee experience. You can broaden out from that. I'd like to link it back to your point that you made earlier with the research stats. I work with many clients who are looking to either increase their impact, or they are thinking about career, and they're thinking about actually, how do I make the progression, how do I continue to rise in terms of the role and responsibilities. And my firm belief is that the key to success is not fitting in with what everyone else is doing, it's standing out.
Absolutely.
The reality is as you said, you stand out by actually having the edge over other people who could do your role. Everyone should be able to do the base level. What makes you distinctive is, have you got this additional knowledge? Have you got these additional skills that actually give you an advantage, that enable you to speak the language of senior leaders? They don't need to know and don't want to know the technicalities of comms channels. They don't want to, worry too much about the crafting of message. What they're interested in is, are you helping to drive either the culture of the organization, effective change in the organization, or ultimately the business outcomes? So I agree with you. Ultimately, if you can't speak that language, then it's pretty important to get, sort of bilingual pretty quickly, not just in what you know, but actually what they are interested in. So I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. Building on that, so thinking about, the implications of that. So where do you see internal comms going in the future, so 2025 and beyond? And you, as you said earlier, you're also part of the Institute of Internal Communications, so I know you have a role in terms of thinking about how that is supporting the profession. So what do you think is going to be really key in the future?
Do you know what? It's such a big question, and it's one that I've discussed with many people many times over the years. And I sort of look at experience and I look at the research that we've done, and I think there are probably a couple of trends, 2 or 3 trends again, that I would talk about in terms of challenges for IC for the future. If you look back over the last 10 years of the research that we've done, a lot of things have stayed the same. Some of the stats we're seeing this year are the same as the stats that we saw 7, 8 years ago, apart from one thing. There's one thing that really changes year on year, and that is the impact, the use of, the involvement of technology. So I think that the pace of technological change in internal comms, you see my arm is sort of going up like this, and year on year, more people are using it. It's having a bigger impact. It's a bigger consideration. And I think that will continue to change. Again, I'm no tech expert, but from the people I speak to and the research we do, tech will play a much bigger part in the world of IC professionals into the future. The second point, and I think it is slightly different to that, is AI and the adoption of AI. I think in the ways in which we expect it to impact us, but in ways in which we probably don't even quite understand at the moment. And I think getting to grips with technology and really understanding the use and the value of AI within your organization, I think is going to be super, super important. And I think that's something people need to consider to be sort of future fit. Again, come back to the question, what's the future going to look like? The way I sort of answer that these days, and again, I've spent many hours sat around round tables, is that no one really knows, right? No one really knows. No one's got a crystal ball. But what we do know is that the future changes. Things drop onto our plate that we weren't expecting. You've got huge amount of change globally, geopolitical events, COVID, everything that comes along. And where I bring that back is to the learning and development and the training that we need to do constantly to be fit for whatever the future is going to give us. And I usually analogy a bit like being race fit. You might get up tomorrow morning, you don't know where you're going to be running to, you don't know who you're going to be running against, you don't know how long you've been running for. But if you put the training in, the learning, the training, the running, the development, then you'll be fit for the future, whatever the future throws at you. And so I say, look, I don't know what the future looks like, but if you learn, if you develop, if you read, you network, if you take on information, you'll be fit for the future, irrespective of what that looks like.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. The question that is picking up what you said there about AI. So Hannah's asked, would you see AI as a challenge or a support? There can be a big fear that it could replace the need for someone to craft communications with their personal knowledge. What's your view on that?
I think it's probably going to be both. I think it's going to be useful, and it's going to have perhaps a negative impact in certain areas on certain people and their job activities. I think the challenge is trying to understand it as much as possible and see where it can provide value to organization and adapt and evolve for where it may cause issues in the future. So again, I don't think we really all know yet. It's work in progress, but I think trying to get ahead of the game and understand it more than anyone else is the key to really getting the best out of it in the future.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So if you're not already using AI, start.
Yeah.
Just start. It's not something to be afraid of in the first instance. Play with it, experiment with it, figure out how it can help you. That could be in terms of your workflows to save you huge amounts of time. It could be, to actually give you ideas that you can then turn into something which is beautifully crafted, or to give you the bones of a plan. It's there as a productivity tool if you choose to use it. But I think it also, to your point, Andrew, reinforces what we were talking about earlier. If you're doing low level, low order, kind of low value tasks, could it replace you? Yeah, probably.
Yep.
So the key is standing out. It's developing your skills, your capability to be at the higher value. And where AI can't replace you is actually having empathy, having emotional intelligence, understanding what your colleagues are thinking. It can process data. It can't yet, replace humans in terms of that connection piece. And that's really vital. It's an important part of what we do in internal communication. So I think embrace AI, don't see it as artificial, but augmenting intelligence, and figure out how you can use it. Great. There's another question I wanted to bring in from the chat. So as a communicator, what's the single best thing you can do to move internal communication from a broadcast function to a function that informs strategic decisions?
That inform strategic decisions. I think I was going to touch on this at some point. I think this relates to a point that we'll probably pick up on, Joss. I think it comes back also to the point I made before, is that the communications activity, the questions you're asking, the feedback you're getting, the way you interact with the business leaders, the board, the CEO, it has to be based on the objectives of the organization. So if you're asking questions, you're getting feedback. If it's relevant to the objectives of the organization, then you're going to be able to use that to feed in to strategic decision making. If you're gathering information and questions which actually are not directly linked and directly impactful for what the board's trying to do, then it's not going to have a huge amount of impact in terms of driving strategic decisions. So understanding those objectives and those aims of the organization, and then linking that to the research, the questioning, the stuff that you're getting from your comms activity to feed back into the organization. I think you have to understand that top level stuff first, and then it should in the round, it should feed into that, would be my guess.
Yeah, I think that's a good summary. I come back to, I think the most critical thing you can do to have a strategic impact is to really understand the business. We talk about business acumen. I think that's absolutely crucial. So if you don't have that, it's going to be a challenge to really have the impact that the leaders are looking for from you. The other thing I'd say is I think it's about insight. So data is all well and good, but data is only valuable if you extract insight from it.
Yeah.
Insight itself is only any good if you then take action off the back of it, and the action's only any good if you learn from it. So if you put that together, you've got data, insight, action, learning, or DIAL, dial for short. We're trying to move the dial. So if you're focused on actually how can we turn insight into action that we learn from the impact of, then you're in a continuous improvement cycle where I think you can really start to elevate your game in terms of being strategic. But it isn't about creating a nice video or doing a really brilliantly written intranet article. That's not going to move the dial on its own. It's how those things contribute to business impact. So I think that's what's crucial from my point of view. Okay, let's come back on track in terms of some of the things that we wanted to talk about. But before we do that, something maybe I can ask Populo colleagues to put in the chat. We're talking a little bit here about credibility as an internal communications person. And Zora Artis has written a brilliant blog post for Populo recently about how to be credible as an internal communications person. So if we can put the link to that in the chat, I think people would find that really useful to take a look at. The other thing I'd love to do very quickly is to run a quick poll. So we're talking about an area of, having strategic impact, actually improving the value of internal communications, of being able to measure that impact. How do you do that? And one of the ways you can do that is potentially to, leverage a technology like Populo. So, embracing that, is, part of the answer. Populo has a range of innovative solutions, and very simply, would you like to learn more? So if you can answer the poll, you may already use Populo and you want to have a follow-up conversation with them. You may not know too much about them. If you would like to touch them, they have some amazing experts who can help explain how you could potentially leverage their software technology, their platform, to improve your impact in internal communications. So thank you for responding to that poll. And if you said yes, one of our colleagues from Populo will be in touch. Thank you very much. So if we can take that poll down. So Andrew, let me build on what you've shared with us already, some brilliant insights. In your experience, what would you say are perhaps the 3 ways to develop a successful career? What are the 3 top things that someone can do to develop their career successfully in internal communications?
Absolutely. And again, I would say this is about developing the most successful careers, right? So you can still have a good career and not do this stuff. But if you do this stuff, my view is you'll get on further. So my absolute number 1 suggestion is to absolutely, at the start of every year, the start of this year, to think about having your own personal learning plan, development plan, and career plan, setting out what you want to achieve, or auditing your own gaps, setting out what you want to achieve, when you want to achieve it, having that written down, a 12-month plan, and actually pushing yourself to review it every month. Set yourself measurable objectives month in, month out over the course of the year. If you look at the poll we asked at the start, Joss, I think probably 10%, if 10% of people do that. So most people don't. The past 20 years have taught me that those people that actually sit, and it's not many, those people that sit down and have that plan and think about it and review it month in, month out, those were the people that actually probably end up having those super successful careers compared to some people that don't. So that is the number 1 tip that I would give. Building on from that, the second tip I would give is to benchmark your own learning, development, and success, not against yourself, so to speak, but against your most successful peers or the most successful people operating in your market. So there's a really hard-hitting point that I make, that anyone that's listening to this webinar, our research tells us that when they go to interview for a job in 2025, they will be interviewing alongside 5 other people. That's what our research tells us. Each organization, on average, interviews 6 people. And all of those 6 people will be able to do the job. So the point I make to people, which is quite hard-hitting, is when you get into that interview room, your ability to do the job is absolutely and utterly irrelevant. It's irrelevant because the other 5 people alongside you can also do the job. If you go in there and say, I can do this job, you're not going to get it because there'll be someone else that can do it better. So the question is, how good am I? Why am I better? Why am I better than the other 5 people that are interviewing alongside me? That is what gets you the job. That's what gets you that super successful career. And that comes from learning, development, planning, measuring your success, et cetera, et cetera. So you have to think, if you set yourself that bar, why am I the best person out of the 6, not just someone that can do the job, then you're in a much better place. So setting the bar high, benchmarking yourself against the best people is really important. I think the other thing I see, go on, Joss.
Sorry, carry on. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I think the other thing I was going to say, the final point is that most people say to me, and I understand, they'll say, look, Andrew, I haven't got time to do all of that. I haven't got time to prepare. I'm too busy doing the day job. And I say to people, look, there is a link. Recognize there is a link. The more you learn, the more you develop, the more you network, the more you understand, the likelihood is the better your results in your day job for your organization. Perhaps you're more efficient, perhaps you implement stuff, there's cost saving, all those sorts of things. So you have the confidence to recognize there is a link between spending time learning and developing for yourself and the way in which you can help your organization, your colleagues, your CEO, your board, all of those sorts of things. And those are definitely 3 tips I would give anyone listening this afternoon.
Brilliant. That's really helpful. I'm wondering if we can leverage your knowledge a little bit further. You talked there about interviews.
Yeah.
And you're often going to be up against other people who are equally well qualified. So how do you stand out? I'm being a bit mischievous here, but I'm wondering, when you're interviewing candidates, what maybe are the kind of 3 kind of challenging interview questions that you like to throw?
Absolutely. So I'll tell you a story. So when I started this job 20 years ago, I used to spend an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours interviewing a candidate, an internal comms manager, head of internal comms. I'd ask them 20, 30, 40, 50 questions. Now, within 10 minutes, by asking 3 questions, I can tell whether the person in front of me is the person that's going to be the best of those 6. I'm generalizing a little bit here, but there are 3 questions. So I would say to the person sat in front of me, I'd say, right, I'm the CEO of the organization. I want to implement best practice internal comms within my organization. I want the best of the best, cutting edge, leading stuff. I'll say, right, Joss, can you tell me about 3 organizations that are delivering best in class internal comms? Tell me about their leader. Tell me about what they're doing, what's innovative, what's brilliant. What are those organizations? What are they doing? What's standing out? And why do you want to implement it in your own organization? And why would you try and implement it in the organization that you wish to join? Now, most people will struggle with that because in an interview, most people will talk about their own experience. Oh, when I was at Coca-Cola, I did this, or when I was at Nike, I did this. But I'm like, yeah, but tell me about best practice. Tell me about the market generally. If someone can answer that with confidence and with real insight, then I know they are ahead of the majority of people that I might meet that day. That'd be question number 1.
Yeah.
The build on that, I would say to people is, look, things are changing at pace in our organization. We don't know what internal comm support we'll need over the next 12, 18 months. Give an example of, tell me where you go to keep up to date with the latest changes in internal comms, innovations in internal comms, technology in internal comms. What networking groups are you part of? What publications are you reading? What webinars are you tuning into? Where do you go on a regular basis to provide this information? Now, we know based on the first poll, most people will struggle with that because they're not spending a lot of time doing it. So the best people, again, the one best person out of the 6 people that's going to be doing that interview, they will say stuff like, well, actually, I listen to every popular webinar. I'm a part of this networking group. I follow this particular person on LinkedIn. That will give me an idea as to whether this person is truly trying to drive improvement every day in the work that they do. The final question I would probably ask people is one of innovation. So I would say to that person sat in front of me, I'd say, look, tell me about what you're doing in your team at the moment, in your organization that's innovative from an internal comms perspective. Not the same old stuff that everyone else does. Tell me about that cutting edge, innovative stuff that you're doing. It might just be innovative for your organization, but where are you pushing the boundaries? Where are you trying to get that incremental success that your peers may not be getting? And again, a lot of people would struggle to give me some insight or some answer around innovative stuff that they are trying or doing. Even if it's just innovative for them, they'll be doing some good stuff, but it'd be quite similar to what everyone else is doing. So the innovative people, again, that will really make them stand out.
Yeah, I think you've offered some really useful thoughts there and pointers in terms of actually preparing for slightly curveball questions. And Tanya said, interesting take, a bit unfair though, is internal comms. And I get that, Tanya. I think what you're saying is, how can you see it when it's internal? I think though, in today's world, there's so much more information that you can learn from. There are any number of different internal communications awards each year. You can look at who are the winners, who are the innovators, who are the best practices. Follow up with them. We have LinkedIn. We can reach out to the people who won the awards. Would you be willing to have a coffee with me or a call with me and share what is it you did? Might not always be super impressive when you get into the detail, but actually you've made another contact, you've learned something, it inspires your own thinking. I think to build on what you said, so much is available to us now for free. For free. You don't have to work that hard. You can use ChatGPT, back to AI. How could I take best practice here? Actually, watch webinars. Popular has tons and tons of valuable information, webinars, blogs, papers that can help you figure out how to be better at this stuff. So there is so much available if you just make a plan and actually start to work your way through it. The other thing I'd say is, don't restrict yourself to just being, clued up on the best practices internal communications. Where I see a real opportunity is organizations are going through massive, massive change, and they're not generally that good at it. And there is so much that we can learn and we can bring into our change practices. So I would encourage people to read up a little bit about neuroscience. How does the brain react to change? Read about behavior science. Read about things like network analysis. Who are the influencers within your organization? Learn about the role of emotions, not just emotional intelligence, but more. So these are things which, as you work your way, through your career, if you start to diversify your knowledge into adjacent areas, you are going to dramatically increase the value of what you can offer. So, I think having a plan, starting with, okay, what are the foundations in internal communications? Who's doing great practice? And then I would build on that and say, go further. What are the things that are going to be useful to you, having an impact by looking at other, adjacent areas?
Yeah, I was just echoing that, Joss. I totally agree. There is so much content out there these days, and you don't need, just to clarify, you don't need to spend hours and hours, 20 hours a week. You spend 5-10 minutes a day. I always sort of, say to people, again, quite provocatively, I come in on the tube most days and I see a lot of people watching repeats of Friends on their phones, or they're playing some crazy little computer game. And I think actually, if you just didn't do that one day and you read, or I see people sitting in the canteen and they're watching that same stuff on their phone. Actually, if you just spent half an hour every other day, you'd be doing more than most. And in terms of the breadth of what you're talking about, in terms of reading around the subject and broader things, I think you're absolutely right. There's so much there, and it's free and it's easily accessible.
Yeah, and that's changed. I mean, that is very different to 15 or 20 years ago. We've got a number of questions coming in both the chat and the Q&A, and I'll come to those in just a moment. I'm wondering, though, if I can ask you another question, Andrew, just building on what you said there. So what are the watch outs? What are the biggest mistakes that you see perhaps internal communications professionals making today regarding their learning development, regarding how they might, show up and present themselves? Can you give people some advice there, things to avoid?
I will, but it's a bit of a flip on what we've talked about before. I think that, again, the biggest issue, the biggest mistake that most people make is not thinking about their future and their learning development. So I say to people, look, when it comes to career plans, some people say, Andrew, I don't want to do that. I don't want to wish my life away. I just want to focus on living in the moment, living in the day. And I say, look, make it a conscious decision. So make it a conscious decision that you want to have a plan, you want to have a career plan and learning plan. Make it a conscious decision and develop that plan. Make it a conscious decision that you don't want to have a plan. Say to me, actually, Andrew, I'm not like that. I'm a bit more free-spirited. I do not want to have a plan. I'll see where the future takes me. Don't be the person in the middle, unconsciously not having a plan, not even thinking about it, waking up one day and thinking, oh my God, why aren't I further ahead? I'm disappointed where I've got to. I've not learned enough. So make it a conscious decision, whatever you decide to do and however much time you decide to invest, think about it first. Don't let the world just pass you by. Again, I think, building what I've said before, I think, and again, it sounds a bit provocative, most people go in to their office every day when they're in the comms role thinking about, oh, what am I going to do from a comms perspective today? And I would say, look, just stop and think about what are you going to do to support the business today? Think about the business more, the business objectives. And I don't say that to be patronizing, but it's feedback I get time and time again. Just go in and think about the organization. I'll give you an example. I interview two heads of internal comms, let's say, and ask them the same question. I say, the person number one, what is it that you do? What is it you do in your organization? And they'll say, Andrew, I'm the head of internal comms. I look after our intranet. I look after our events. I look after our employee survey, et cetera, et cetera. That's what I do. Say to the second person, what is it you do? And they say, oh, Andrew, I'm a senior member of the leadership team. I work very closely with the CEO and the board. The board have a very significant set of challenging objectives this year, and it's my job to support the board and the CEO to deliver on those challenging objectives or increase the share price or whatever it may be. Oh, and by the way, what I do on a day-to-day basis is I support that by delivering these comms activities. What you want to be is that second person focused on the business who delivers comms, not the person who's just focused on comms, delivering comms, if that makes sense. I think the final point, Joss, is really about data and proving that value. I know it's something we've probably all talked about a lot in the past. It's not always easy. But again, there's a lot of people that say to me, oh, Andrew, yes, data, but I just know that my internal comms has a great impact on retention, staff retention. It's all about staff retention. I say, great. What's the metrics behind that? How many staff has been retained? Where's the graph on that? And actually, what's the cost of average onboarding someone new or hiring someone new in their training? So how much have you saved in monetary value from this great, comms that you're doing that aids retention? So there's still a lack of data and measurement and metrics. I think there could be more of that. And I think that would help people get along in advance, and it helps those people that are most successful.
Yeah, and again, I think we can look to other related disciplines that we can learn from. And Catherine's made the point in the chat that marketing is a great source of inspiration in terms of creativity and grabbing attention techniques. I think they're also far better than communicators in terms of measuring. So if you look into marketing, the use of data, insight, segmentation, a lot of the things that we've brought into internal communications in the last 15, 20 years, actually, a lot of them have their origins in marketing. So I think that's, it's good advice in terms of bringing the data in. It's clear you believe, Andrew, that learning and development has a link to being better at delivering impact and, having a successful career. So, we might think it's just, okay, if I build the skills, the career will follow. But it feels to me like there's a link in there in terms of, yes, develop the skills, develop the knowledge, but it's how you apply it. It sounds like it's actually doing a better job in internal communications as part of your view.
Absolutely. I think it's all linked. I think what I'm trying to say this afternoon is, look, you can have a really good career by ignoring all of my advice. And there are lots of people that have really good careers. But if you're dialing into this webinar thinking, how can I, and there's something in the title about the most successful career, the best possible career, the best opportunities, the most stimulation, the best remuneration, the biggest impact at board level, how you really change the dial in an organization. If you really want to do that, then the competition is tough and your ability to do the job ain't going to cut it. You need to be the best person in the room, the best person in the boardroom, all of those sorts of things. And to achieve that level, you absolutely need to invest in your learning, your development, your career planning, etc. And that absolutely is a link. It's all linked back to what you do in your day-to-day job. You can't be the best, you can't deliver the best stuff for your organization if you're not learning and developing at the same time. So there is a link between what you do individually and what you're able to do in your organization and for your team and your boss and your peers and all of that sort of stuff. And what I say is make it a conscious decision to think about that stuff rather than just leaving it to chance. It might happen by chance, but it's just chance. You know, that isn't what I would want to settle for. Certainly what I wouldn't advise people to do. Don't leave it to chance.
Yeah, I would agree with that. You know, model I use with my coaching clients all the time is a three-step process. So firstly, I think you need insight. And I think you've given us lots to think about today and lots of places that we can go and get more insight. I think then what people need is to be clear about their intention. So having got the insight, what do you want to do with that? Actually, how do you want to use that and leverage that? And then the intention is only good if you put it into action. And from action, we have to go back to insight again. Okay, so I did that. What happened? What was the result? So if you go to an interview, okay, I was intentional. I wanted to show up and be a little bit more strategic and more expansive. What did I learn? How did that go? What would I do differently next time? What's the insight I got from it? What worked well? What would I do differently? So I think when you use that as a continuous cycle, insight, intention, action, I think it can be really helpful in building on what you're talking about. I also, though, I'm mindful, Andrew, we talk quite a lot, and as the CEO of VMA Group, you're obviously you're involved in interviewing quite a lot of senior candidates, and as you say, you reference CEO and board, and certainly at that top level, senior level, that is where we're trying to get to, is that level of impact and influence. But I'm sure we've got lots of colleagues, you know, on today who are from a very broad spectrum, a range of roles, and of course, your colleagues in your team recruit for all levels, you know,
Absolutely.
down to, you know, most junior, you know, internal communications roles. So I'm wondering, you know, if you think there's any different advice, and in particular, there's a couple of questions I want to bring in here just to frame this for you, if that's okay. So the first one from Suzanne is, she's looking for a part-time role in internal communications, but can't find anything. Do you have any tips for her? And then Christine has said, I've worked primarily as a consultant for large enterprise customers on their internal communication strategies, messaging, tone, channels, measurement. How can I make the shift to working in-house as an IC professional?
Okay. In terms of part-time definitely exists more as an opportunity now than it did, again, 20 years ago. There are organizations that will hire people on a part-time basis. Probably, again, to put that into context, that's probably 3 days a week as opposed to 5 days a week. But it does exist. I think, you know, again, in terms of finding a job, there are two things that have the biggest impact, again, in my experience. One is the time and effort that you put into the job search itself, and one is the interview preparation. If you get to the interview preparation, like I said before, you've got to prove you're the best person in the room, but you've got to get to the interview in the first place. And that is, there are a number of channels to market. So, you know, how do you find these jobs, these part-time jobs? You've got to, you know, I say treat it like a job in itself. Get up at 7, have your cup of coffee, start looking at 8, stop for lunch, you know, work again till 5:30. Speak to people you've worked with in the past, speak to as many recruitment agencies as you can, follow up with adverts that you see online. Maybe you've got a list of organizations. Maybe you've worked in a particular sector. Let's say you've worked in financial services, you've worked for 2 or 3 banks. Maybe there's 20 or 30 you haven't worked for. Maybe reach out to those organizations, maybe the director, head of communications, tell them you're available for part-time work, ask them whether they've got anything. So there's a lot of different channels that you can take, but the reality is, it could be a lot of hard work. You might get lucky, but it could just be a lot of hard work to find that. But I would say, have confidence. They do exist more so than perhaps ever. But like any job search, you have got to put the time and effort into going out there and find them. And if you're speaking to a recruiter, make them aware that you're particularly interested in that. The good ones will make a note of that. And then hopefully when those part-time roles come up, there'll be someone that you call. In terms of making the second question, in terms of making the move, again, I think, it definitely happens. If you're working in an agency, you want to make the move in-house. Again, I think it definitely happens. But again, it's all about the time and effort and the preparation that you put into it. Because as I say, if you're interviewing alongside 5 other people, there's 6 people in interview, you've got a 1 in 6 chance of getting that job. If you interview for 2 or 3 jobs, the odds are still stacked against you. Once you interview for 6 jobs or 7 jobs, the stats say that you're probably going to get one of them. So actually making that move from in-house, from agency to in-house, that's entirely possible. I think actually bringing those agency skills in-house is a really positive thing. I see that as a really good thing. But you just got to get out there and sweat those networks, meet people, make people aware that you're available, speak to recruiters. Again, have that elevator pitch. What is it that you're going to offer? Why is that move a really good thing for the organization, et cetera, et cetera? So it just comes back to the fact that I've given that person confidence, say it's entirely possible. I see it happening, but you've just got to put time and effort into that job search, perhaps more so than most people think or give to that job search.
Yeah, and what would you say around networking? Because it's always struck me that, you're not always going to be in touch with the recruiter recruiting. You might not always see a post on LinkedIn. How can people use their networks to help them progress their careers?
Do you know what? I was one of those people when I started. I was fearful of networking. I think a lot of people are like, oh, God, networking sounds horrible. Now, I love it, embrace it, because actually what you realise is most people are fearful of it. And actually most people are quite nice when you reach out and you go and meet them for a chat, or you bump into them at an event, or you go up and shake their hand and introduce yourself. So I think networking is a really great thing. And I think it's something I would encourage people to do each and every day of the week. I reach out to people on the telephone, on LinkedIn. I go meet people at events. I do that every week. Okay, that's part of my job. But actually, again, coming back to the availability of content, with LinkedIn and events and stuff these days, there's so many opportunities to network. And I would say, most people make the mistake of not networking for 2 or 3 years. Then they decide to look for a job and they think, oh my God, I better start networking. And then they network for 6 weeks. Maybe they get a job, maybe they don't. It is something you should do over the long term, because I think, if you meet and I've seen this happen, someone meets a head of internal comms, nothing quite happens, 3 years later, suddenly they meet again, or, and so actually, you're building, again, it comes back to the plan. If you're building your career for the long term, building some networking, build in networking for the long term. And eventually, the more people you meet, the more people you know, I would say, based on my experience, that will provide more opportunities for you. You've got to get out there and be proactive again and own that.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And I think the other thing I'd say is that, networking doesn't mean like huge rooms, conferences, speed dating. If you're more comfortable having one-to-one or one to a few people conversations, that's absolutely fine. That's networking too. And that's often a way to build a deeper connection and make an impression with someone. So I think networking is a vital tool in the job seekers and the career developers sort of toolbox. Another question for you, a couple of things. So I'm seeing across the chat and the Q&A. So people who might be looking to transition into internal comms. So Katie has said she's job hunting, transitioning to internal comms full-time after many years in a hybrid external internal comms role. I'm worried that if I apply for mid-career positions that offer the opportunity to learn in the field, potential employers may reject me outright due to my 20+ years of work experience. Do you think I should be concerned about this? So that's one. And then I've also seen, people who are moving. I think, D is moving from Marcoms, looking to get into an internal comms, thinks it's a related discipline with transferable skills, but would that be valued by, HR or whoever else might be recruiting? So maybe you could give us your view in terms of, for people moving into internal communications, is that a good thing, not a good thing? How would they navigate that?
I'd certainly encourage confidence here, because I think things have changed in a really positive way. So if we go back 20 years, if I was recruiting an internal comms role for an organization, that organization would want to see CVs of people that have only ever done internal comms and have only ever done really the exact job that they're looking to hire. And if I sent someone that had some Marcoms experience or PR external, they would say, Andrew, guys, it's not right. They're just not right. They're just too broad. I want an internal comms specialist. Now, what we get from clients, quite rightly so, I think, is the client will say, look, I need an internal comms manager or head of internal comms, but actually, Andrew, if they've got some brand experience, if they've got a bit of marketing experience, some data experience, actually, if they've got some external comms experience, actually, that would be really helpful. And actually, as a recruiter and headhunter, I'd be recommending that my clients as well. I'd be saying, hey, look, I know this is an internal comms role, but actually there's some value here in this broader experience that this individual has. So I think both of the questions there, first off, I would say, look, it's entirely possible to make those moves. But there will always be people that will discriminate, right? They'll, oh no, I want someone who's a purist, or you're too senior, you're too junior. It comes back to what I've said before. It's your experience, lack of, whether you've done marcoms, internal, external, whether you come from agency, in-house, that's kind of irrelevant. The thing that will make the difference is how much time and effort you put into that job search and how much networking, etc., how many jobs you apply for. Every move is possible. I've helped people move from public sector into financial services. I've helped people move from agency straight into pharmaceutical. Yeah, I've seen everything. I've seen everything happen when people tell me it never happened. So everything is possible. It's the time and effort that you put into that search that will make the biggest impact.
Yeah, no, good advice. There's a few questions in the chat, Andrew, which is slightly different. I'm going to come back to some of the more kind of career-oriented ones, but there's one or two questions which are about the impact of technology in other spaces, and how do we get leaders to see kind of the importance of things like culture. I'll come back to the culture because I think that's an interesting question. So a question in terms of let me just find it. Yeah, so how much has IT business processes changed the comms landscape? So Tanya's asked, concepts like change management, agile, waterfall, feels a little bit like things that might have been covered on a traditional MBA path. So Masters in Business Administration has gone out the window in favour of IT style management. Interesting your thoughts on that. And then Tanya has a follow-up question, which is, how is HR recruitment software affecting the internal communication space? Seems like a lot of suppliers want to be in the same space. Just interested in your thoughts on that. I have a thought as well, but just to respond to Tanya's questions, what would you say?
I'll come back to the second in a second, so I'm not quite sure of the question. But the first question, I think it is true that, again, we've seen a change in recent times, over the last few years. A lot of organizations will come to us in a good way and say, look, we've got this big IT change program going on. We've got this big business transformation program going on. And actually, when someone comes to us and says we're going through some kind of change or business transformation program, often IT is the one thing that is the common theme in terms of why they are changing. A lot of those people that are coming to us looking for comm support, maybe program directors, project directors, they may be heads of technology or whatever. So they are looking for, or they think they are looking for, people that have, these sort of change methodologies, the experience, the agile, all of the understanding of all of that sort of stuff. So we are seeing that more and more. Again, it comes back to what we said before. I think having that understanding as a comms professional is really good, because actually, if you understand lots of different change methodologies and all of these things that these project program managers will be working towards and their qualifications, and we see comms people taking these change qualifications, then I think that's a really good thing, because it will make you stand out. It means you're more knowledgeable. It means you understand perhaps the challenges that they're going through a little bit more. So I appreciate it might have a cost and a time implication, but again, if you're investing for the long term, I would look for the positives in the knowledge and learning that you can get from things like that and some of those qualifications.
Yeah, I would agree. So I think that it's a reflection of how critical technology is to every organization now. You can't run an organization without leveraging technology. And as a result, there is a lot of change. But things like Lean Six Sigma are actually one of the best jobs I ever did, was leading communications for supply chain at GSK. And I learned so much from being in our factories, in our warehouses, in our distribution centers, understanding actually how we were improving things. So a little bit like we were talking about marketing, what learning can you bring in from marketing? You can bring so much in from agile, from things like lean processes, from change management frameworks like ADCAR and other things. I'm actually a certified agile change coach. What does that mean? It doesn't mean I go out and I promote agile methodology. What it means is I help clients to navigate change using neuro hacks, using neuroscience as a way to navigate change more successfully. So I don't see it as IT is taking over, but I agree with you. I think these are skills which is useful to know. I think on the HR software, I think there's a move towards more integration is what we need to see. It's when you get fragmented systems that actually make the user experience, the employee experience worse. We should be intervening as internal communicators. We should be saying, hang on a minute, how are we making it easier for our colleagues to do great work? And if these systems aren't helping, we shouldn't just be communicating what the system does. We should be challenging the strategy and the thinking around the user experience. So I always see the role as a bit more expansive rather than narrow, and I think that there are huge opportunities for us to influence and actually deliver better impact for the organization. There was another question I saw, which was around how do you get leaders to care about the impact of company culture and internal communication? Do you have a view on that, Andrew?
I do, slightly provocative maybe. I think a lot of them do. I think one of the things that I hear time and time again from people is that, oh, leaders don't care, leaders don't understand, leaders don't care, they're not interested. And again, might be, I say, actually, no, I think you're wrong. I think most of this, all of the CEOs I've ever spoken to in business life, in personal, they all care about employees, engagement of employees, impact on the business, culture, well-being. Yeah, again, some CEOs may care more than most. Okay, and there's always going to be one rogue, right, CEO. But I think on the whole, I think there's a danger that we comms people criticize leaders too much for not caring, whereas on the whole, I think the majority of leaders do care. And I think that is a real danger that I see happening. And so, how to make them care? I think they do care. Maybe there's stuff that they don't understand in the way that you do. Maybe that's a conversation to be had. But yeah, I would answer that by saying, actually, I think they do. It's just understanding how different people approach a particular project.
I think you're right. Again, I'll go back to something we've talked about earlier today. I think it's about linking internal communications, engagement, culture to business performance. It is about actually how do they contribute to supporting people to do better work, to be more innovative, to be more collaborative, to be more competitive versus other providers. So for me, I think culture is vital, but actually I think leaders do care. What they respond best to often is what's the risk we run if we don't actually pay adequate attention to our culture and how it can support us. So when you frame it around risk or consequence, that tends to be the language they understand. So again, it's about having the business acumen, speaking their language.
I think so. The only thing I would say there as well, what I sometimes hear a lot is, look, leaders don't care what employees think. And I say, look, these leaders are employees and they're human beings. And they've got personal issues and families and kids, and the dog's got to take them to vet. They're normal people. And actually, don't think that they're this alien species. They are employees. Even the CEO, really, in most cases, is an employee. He's a human being. She's a human being, just like the rest of us. So, let's not think that they are different people, because they're just employees like you and I.
Okay, we're almost at time. I've saved one question to the end, because I think this is a good one to finish on. So Abby has said that currently an intern in internal communications, what would you say is the biggest piece of advice to help me grow in my career? Let's have a quick short answer to finish on that one.
Be your thirst for knowledge, be inquisitive, keep learning, keep asking, keep networking. Just don't stop losing that thirst for knowledge and development. That will just fire you up and keep you going.
Brilliant. What a great note on which to end. Andrew, thank you so much for sharing your insights and wisdom with us. There's lots of appreciation for what you've shared, what we both shared. So, it sounds like it's gone down well. Thank you for making time for this. I've really loved the conversation. Thank you all for joining us today. And thank you to Populo for hosting this. It seems it's been a very popular topic. So thank you, Andrew. Thank you,
My
Populo.
pleasure.
And hopefully we'll see you again for another webinar soon.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.